Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Turn Over the Tape. As always, you are here with Keegan and Matt. Matt, how are you this evening?
Yeah, pretty good.
Excellent. And we're going to dive into the round 3 loss to the Crows, and we're also going to talk about the upcoming game, the upcoming big game now with Carlton on the weekend. But we think we should probably start with the big news out of the Suns game this weekend, and that is the ACL injury to Witts. And the reason it's such a big injury is because he's such a big part of our game. He's such a big part of our setup that we feel like that this is one that's definitely worth sort of talking over between ourselves. So Matt, overall, firstly, how do you feel about the Witts injury?
I mean, obviously it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's also severely untimely given the fact that Zach Smith is still 4 weeks away. We just don't have a good ruck option. And it was frustrating watching the Crows game because I actually think he was playing particularly well up until the injury. And then, Riley O'Brien took over from there, basically. But yeah, it is utterly devastating. He was a point of difference for our side. The fact that we had a ruck that could basically compete with any other ruck in the competition. He might not beat like a Grundy, but he'd halve a lot of contests. So it is not a good thing.
Yeah, it's really rough because he does provide that bit of a point of difference. He's the tallest ruckman in the league, if I'm not mistaken. So he does half a lot of contests. He's good for a couple of marks around the ground as well. And yeah, it's one of those ones where when I saw it, I was like, I don't think that's an ACL because because we had Butterick do his ACL last week. So it shows you the kind of run we're on. And he sort of just did it sort of standing almost by himself in the middle of a patch of grass. Whereas this one was more contact where Riley O'Brien either fell or it was pushed or whatever onto the Witts' knee. And then that was it. And he sort of came out after he did it, after he got it checked out, he came back out afterwards. And I was like, oh, he's moving around okay. It's not too bad. Like when Butterick had done his knee last week, they put it in a brace straight away without doing much else. But with Witts, they sort of let him walk around a bit, and then he sat back down on the boundary with an ice on it. I'm like, all right, so maybe it's not too bad. It might be a couple of weeks, but we'll manage. But yeah, ACL is an absolute heartbreaker. And as you said, Smith is 4 weeks away. So what do you think the option is now, Matt? We haven't got a healthy ruckman on the list where Smith and Witts are both probably the two senior ruckmen. They're injured. Then I think you've got Conroy. I think that's his name. His ACL's done as well. So there's 3 rucks, and they're all gone.
Sam Day is indefinite.
So Sam Day's also indefinite. He would be one you could probably throw in as well. We traded Peter Wright at the end of last year, so we're really sort of down to bare bones here. So what do you think the strategy is going to be going forward with the ruck situation?
Honestly, I think we saw it on show in the Crows game. I think it's going to be a bit of Burgess, a bit of Greenwood, and just really, really hope that the midfielders just really stick tight to their man and don't let him have any space at the ruck contest.
Yeah, I think we're going to be going back to that contested style we saw a few years ago, especially from the middle, where Witts would be just dropping it on the ground. But what's going to be happening now is instead of him just dropping it to the ground out of choice, our players basically just have to man up in the middle. We can't be proactive in the middle now. We've got to be reactive. We've got to try and read the opposition ruckman's taps. But as we saw in the Collingwood-Brisbane game earlier in the week, you can have all the hit-outs in the world, but it might not matter at the end of the game. So fingers crossed for us there. So that's the big injury. Witts is out. Probably looks like Burgess will probably have a crack. Maybe even someone like a Caleb Graham might come back, and he was a ruckman as a junior. He might have a crack as well if they want to rotate through. We're all fans of Caleb Graham here. So fingers crossed we get it sorted before Saturday. Now, other than the Witts injury, we actually ended up there was actually a game that happened as well, and we went down to the Crows by 10 points at Adelaide Oval. Our Hex at the Adelaide Oval continues. Still haven't won at the Adelaide Oval. It was a competitive game, but ultimately we came up short, which is the frustrating part. Matt, what were your overall thoughts of the game?
The first thought I had towards the end of the game was I was on for my Suns by 2 points margin from last podcast. I was like, oh, we're down by 4 here. If we kick a sneaky goal,
Yeah,
I'm going to
fair.
get it bang on the margin, but not to be. Mixed feelings. Obviously, the way we started being up by, what did we get up to? 23 points to nil, basically, at the start. We were dominating, and I think some of our mates on chat were saying things like the Suns are playing speed run strats here. They're just trying to finish the AFL game as quickly as they can, get to 100 as quick as they can. But it sort of fell off any single time Adelaide won the centre clearance and can get it to Tex Walker, who was unfortunately a fairly large factor in the game. That's sort of where I see it. It was a lot of enterprise sort of undone by probably a lack of consistency and the fact that we just couldn't keep Tex out of the game.
Yeah, we'll talk about Tex specifically in a minute and sort of how that Collins and Tex battle went. But just sort of an overall, from my point of view, you're exactly right. We dominated the first sort of, probably the first sort of 10, 15 minutes of the first quarter. We should have been 5-6 goals ahead at that point. We spurned a lot of good opportunities.
Well, So sorry to interrupt, but like there was also that Rankin tap up that was called a throw,
Yeah.
Like that goal gets paid, suddenly we are 5 goals up. You sort of wonder how many points in front we would need to be to break them, and it could have been a different result entirely.
Yeah. So. I think it was a game of missed opportunities sort of at the end of the day. We had opportunities, especially late, we had opportunities to get ahead. Early on, we had Darcy McPherson sort of missed a goal from about 15 meters out on a slight angle, which is an absolute killer. It was a great tackle, but sort of at the end of the day, sort of didn't finish off his work. And then Ainsworth in the last quarter had 2 opportunities to put us ahead and spurned them both. He had a real dirty game. And I think while I sort of on the Friday night itself, I was actually quite frustrated. I sort of slept on it a little bit, and I sort of thought about it the next day, and I'm like, look, it isn't ideal, definitely not ideal, but I feel like there's enough improvement left. Like a lot of our good players had awful games. Like you look through the stats. Swallow had 12 touches. Weller had 12 touches. Ainsworth had 7 touches. Sexton had 5 touches.
Hey, Keegs.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about this game. Did you think it was a low quality game, a medium quality game, or a high quality game?
It was a medium quality game.
Okay. I think that's fair.
I think where there were enough times. Our issue was we were trying to play a uncontested game of football, but we weren't moving forward. We were getting the ball, kicking it backwards as soon as we got the ball, which I'm assuming is a directive from the coaching, because when some players took a mark or got a free kick, they didn't even look forward. They looked straight to their side and would bring it inboard, but sort of go backwards. So I feel like there might be a few things we need to work out there. It's early in the season, so you're not gonna completely throw the strategy out, but I don't think it really worked for that Crows game.
Yeah. I think it's fair to have the expectation that we should have won that game going into it, but it is hard for me to sort of be like absolutely devastated by the result, given the fact that the teams are fairly well contested. It felt even all night after the first 15 minutes, basically.
Yeah, and that's the way I look at it. And another way to look at it was there was one man that was all the difference, and he played, unfortunately, he was on the Crows side, and that was Tex Walker. His revitalization over the past 3 weeks has been nothing short of miraculous. No one would have tipped him to have this sort of form heading into the season. And he dominated Sam Collins. Collins sort of was lost by the end, and that's very rare. He's been quite a solid fullback for us since he coming in, but he looked devoid of ideas by the end. And yeah, so Matt, you sort of wanted to have a bit of a chat about Tex Walker and how he sort of got on top of Collins.
Yeah, so I'm trying to determine whether Sam Collins had a bad night or whether it's really just um, more incumbent on the fact that there's been those two rule changes, reducing of the interchanges and the man on the mark rules, that for some reason seem to really open up scoring opportunities for key forwards. Obviously, it's giving a lot more space for those key forwards to find, giving them more opportunity to mark the ball, kick their goals. I'm trying to work out, was this a bad game for Sam Collins, or is Tex Walker in a position where the game is now really suited for him and he was always going to feast?
Yeah. I think personally, I think the game is set up more for the key forwards. I don't think it's set up to 17 goals in the first 3 rounds of a key forward, though. It's a mixture of, it's set up now where the key forwards have a bit of more of a whipping hand, but also I think Walker's just in good form as well.
Sure.
So I think it's definitely a little bit of both. Like he was getting marks 55 out from goal, and he'd poke it through from 55 meters in. It would go in post height. Like there's nothing you can do about that. And I think that one-on-one contested style that this rule change sort of almost forces players into sort of benefits Walker though in those ways that he could get Collins one-on-one, or sometimes if Ballard was on him, he could get Ballard one-on-one, and didn't allow for that crossover where Collins might come in and intercept, or Ballard might come in and intercept, or a Powell might come in and intercept. He just had it all his own way. And to be fair, that's also up to the Crows midfield as well. I think they Laird and Sloan especially. Those 3 players were the difference between the 2 teams. Their players fired, our players didn't. But even if you look at key forwards, like Ben King kicks 4 goals, so that's a good game for him, and that showed that if both key forwards are kicking good amounts of goals, then those rule changes are probably having the effect the AFL want.
Agreed.
So before we sort of get into looking at like the best on grounds, I wanted to, because we had so many sort of poor performers, before we even get to Carlton game, who do you think is on the knife edge of probably finding their way out of this team?
Well, I mean, Sexton had a quiet game, but you're not cutting him.
I can try.
Ainsworth, you can try. You do like to cut players, Keegan. I know that. Ainsworth had a pretty dirty game. It really wasn't a great game for him to put up. And while DMAC does a fair bit of tackling, missing that goal was criminal. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I feel like the ball went down the other end and they scored basically off the next ensuing play, which, is typical, right?
Yeah.
He might be in a little bit of trouble, but it's a tough one. I actually think, whilst there were a few dirty performances, there were some. I don't think Lemons is going. I think Markov was okay. He had a couple of clangers, but he wasn't that bad. I really think it's really just Ainsworth and DMAC who might be in a little bit of trouble.
I've got one that I reckon will probably be dropped, but I'll probably talk about him when we get to talking about how we want the setup for the Carlton game. This is a bit of a shout out, sort of as we move into sort of looking at our best on grounds, and we'll do our votes in a second. I actually thought after we sort of panic, I don't think panic was the right word. We worried about Harbrow. I actually thought Harbrow was solid. I don't think he had a particularly bad game. He didn't give away that one Harbrow free kick where he'll usually just clothesline someone in the middle of nowhere. I thought he was serviceable, and I thought that he had 14 kicks and 2 handballs. Like he did what he was supposed to do. But it probably helps because Adelaide probably have a young team, so he can use his experience there. But I think overall, we can sort of notch it up to too many good players had bad games, and probably put it in a box, put it to the side, and sort of get up for Carlton this week. But before we do that, we do have to do our votes for this week, because this was a game. And so far, we have Anderson on 6 votes, Bose on 5 votes, and Lukosius on 5 votes for the unnamed podcaster medal. We still haven't named it yet. We'll get there eventually. So, Matt, I want your 3, your 2, and your 1 from this round.
Um, I think in terms of just general effort throughout the entirety of the game, it's pretty hard to look past Hugh Greenwood. So he probably gets my 3. I actually thought Brendan Ellis had a really good game. He was fairly serviceable on the wing, always hitting dangerous areas. A couple of times he got given hospital balls and managed to find a way to get rid of it in a half decent way. So I thought he had a pretty good game. He can have my 2.
Yep.
And the 1 point is an absolute toss up. But I think that there was enough in Anderson's performance to enjoy it enough to give him the 1. I think the fact that he had 18 contested possessions in his 26 is pretty good for a 20 gamer.
No, that's fair. I think Anderson was really good. I don't know how effective he was. But yeah, he got a lot. He got 26 touches. So he continued on from his form last week, which was good. For the 3, I'm probably going to follow you along. I reckon Greenwood definitely gets my 3. He was just he was immense. Clearances, tackles, touches. He had it all, really. You can't really fault Hugh Greenwood. Against his old mob, he probably wanted to perform, and he definitely did that. My 2 votes, I think I might go. Yeah, I'm going to go Ellis as well. I think Ellis had a good game. I think he's kicked a really good goal as well, sort of a nice snap over his shoulder from about 40 meters out. I think we probably should give Ellis a bit more kudos than he sometimes gets. He's a very solid player. Is he being overpaid slightly? Probably, but I think he does well. He holds that defensive wing position well, where one wing will be more of an attacking wing that will go forward a bit more, and one wing will sort of pull back a bit, and Ellis is that defensive wing, and I think he does quite a good job of it. The only criticism I have of him is when he gets the ball, he's got time and space, and he just throws it on the boot and kicks it out very quickly without sort of assessing his options. That's probably the one criticism I could have of him. But overall, I think he's been a good, solid acquisition for the Suns overall. And the 1, you gave it to Anderson. I could give it to Anderson. Who else had a solid game? Lemons had a solid game. Markov was okay. King kicked 4. Rankin was okay at times. I'd probably like to see him touch the ball a little bit more, but he had a few moments there. But I'm gonna not in a condescending way. It's going to sound condescending, but I think I've got to give the 1 to Burgess. I think the fact that he kicked 2 goals, he was called on to do a really, really hard job that he was definitely outmatched for. O'Brien is a good ruckman, despite what happened with him and Nick Natanui last year. He's a good ruckman, and I think Burgess applied himself well. So this is more of a
participation of what it sounds like.
It's not a participation. It isn't. He didn't have a dominating game by the numbers, but I think the effort that he put in and putting himself about and having a crack, and him and Holman, I could actually give 1 to Holman as well, because he kicked 2 goals in the last quarter. It sort of kept us in it as well. So I think Holman and Burgess, 2 probably of players on that list that aren't the most talented they're not like have the silky skills of your Lukosiuses or your Andersons, but I think that those 2 definitely showed the way of how we should be playing and putting in that effort. So I think I'm going to give the 1 to Burgess as an encouragement award, hoping that that 1 vote will propel him to heights unseen over the next couple of weeks, because we actually will need him to perform quite well for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So overall,
get 25% of his hit outs.
Yeah. So overall, that actually will put they'll put Anderson on top with 7 votes now, with 1 extra this week. Greenwood rockets into second with 6 votes. Bose and Lukosius are still around there in 3rd, and then Ellis will be around there with 4 votes as well. So we're starting to see the Greenwoods and the Andersons, and I think those guys will be up and about towards the end of the year as well, once we sort of get all said and done through the season. Now, let's put that Adelaide game behind us. It's in a box. We talked about it. It's done. We need to move on to the Carlton game. A game now that is actually really important.
Yeah.
I would have, if we beat Adelaide, I would have been like, okay, the Carlton game could be a tricky game. If we drop the game, so be it. But now that we've dropped the Adelaide game, this game becomes very important. One we need to win. And it doesn't help that it seems like Patrick Cripps has found his form all of a sudden after the first 2 weeks of being absolutely moving around like my 70-year-old grandfather. He's finally found some form, and he looks like he hit 30 touches and 2 goals on the weekend. So the first question off the top then, Matt, for the Carlton game this week, what do we do with Patrick Cripps? Do we tag him? Do we leave him? What do you think we have to do with him?
I mean, given the fact that we're not going to have a ruck that's going to win many hitouts, we should just be literally tagging their entire midfield. So, I mean, tagging sounds like a fairly logical option. The problem is given how big he is, if he gets mobile and starts to dominate his opposition tagger, it could be big problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, tag him.
Yeah. So you've got 2 options. Like you've got Walsh and you've got Cripps probably in their midfield who are probably their best players. So yeah, who do you sit on? Do you sit on? I'd be almost tempted to sit on Walsh because he's almost the link. He's been the link between their midfield, from their midfield to their forward line. Whereas Cripps is in and under, and he'll get his 30 in the middle, but you have to hope that the likes of Hugh Greenwood and Swallow can break that even and sort of negate Cripps by getting the ball first, and then maybe a Miller sitting on Walsh, because Miller's shown that he can tag before in the past. Yes, it might sort of dilute his touches a little bit. He might not get as many touches, but I think with the way we're going to have to set up, I think that's going to probably be our best bet, is Miller sitting on one of their best midfielders. And I think that's the way to go this week. So what change would you be looking at this week, Matt? So thinking about Witts has to go out. He's injured. Yeah. I don't think there's any other injuries. So Witts is probably the only one that has to be replaced. And would you be replacing anyone else? Because we're getting to that point now, we're 1 and 2, where form might start coming into it a bit, into some of the decision-making for us.
Whilst we had a number of players who probably didn't have the best games, a lot of them have runs on the board. I feel like the team is pretty good as is, bar maybe either Darcy McPherson or Ainsworth out or traded in as the medical sub. I think Holman showed enough over the last 3 weeks, given he gets a run every week because we always have injuries. I think he's actually done enough to earn a start. So if that happens, I wouldn't be surprised, and it might come at the expense of perhaps Darcy McPherson or maybe Ainsworth, given Ainsworth probably had the worst game.
Yeah. So, all right. So who would you bring in to replace Witts then? Because you think
no good options, Keeks.
Yeah, Burgess is going to come. Because he started. He's going to go into the ruck. Then who replaces Burgess in the forward line? You think?
Honestly, like, there's a part of me that just says, screw it, put David Swallow in the ruck. Just let him not get trod on, and then just have him pretend to ruck and then try be first at the ball.
Yeah.
And just accept that we're going to lose every single hit out.
Yeah.
I don't know. Burgess maybe on occasion and have Greenwood in there every now and then. But I don't feel like we're going to win a ton of hit outs. So I don't know why we should. I don't know how we can prioritize it appropriately. Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not the Suns coach. That's Stewie's problem.
Yeah, that's fair. So what I would probably do is you'd probably look at 2 things. So either you go for someone like Corbett to replace Burgess in the forward line as that as that second marking forward, or you go completely the other way, go with a really small forward line, and maybe bring in Caleb Graham to sit as a third tall, as your second key defender, allowing Ballard to sort of play more as a floating defender. But then also that forward line, are you confident enough that a small forward line can handle it? Or I honestly think Corbett will come in for Witts and Burgess will go into the ruck, because we do need that second lead up forward. And Corbett showed last year that he has a little bit about him. So I think that would be that change. As far as your suggestion of Holman coming in goes, 100%, I'd bring Holman in, and I'd probably sit Ainsworth as a medical sub just to give him a bit of sting him a little bit. I still want him involved, and I still want him potentially coming on, because if he comes on at like 3/4 time fresh, he can definitely make an impact there. But I think like that probably wouldn't hurt. I think Holman's played well enough in the little cameos, or even the more there haven't even been cameos because they've been injured so early in the game. I think he's done enough to sort of warrant a start. But the one actually that I didn't mention earlier, and I'm going to mention now, is Will Brodie. I think poor Will may have played his last game for the Suns. I think I'm not retiring him. I'm not getting rid of him. Well, I'm not getting rid of him, but I think Stewie will. I think Dew showed in the past that he's not a massive fan of Will Brodie. And if Will Brodie, he doesn't need many excuses to drop Will Brodie. If you think about how he's played 3 games now, so he's had a block of games. And at the start of the season, I was asking for Will Brodie to get a block of games just to see how he went. So he's had 3 games now. The first 2, he was okay. I don't think he was amazing. I don't think he hasn't featured in any of our discussions about who the best players on the ground have been. He's been serviceable, but Rory Sloane on the weekend ripped him to absolute shreds. Like there were times on the contest where Brodie was on Sloane, someone just run away from him.
Yeah.
And so I think Brodie's had a chance now. He's had 3 games. He's had a good run at it to try and impose himself and sort of just demand to be picked. And I just don't think he's demanded to be picked. So I think you take Brodie out as well, put him in your back pocket just in case we have another couple of our big mid, like a Hugh Greenwood gets injured and we need another bigger midfielder. But it also probably falls into the category of, with the game changing now, being more open, those big inside mids aren't as required as they once were a few years ago, where it was basically a big ruck maul, like it was a big maul like you're playing rugby union. So I think I would be taking Brodie out. If it was up to me, I'd be taking Brodie out. And then if you take Brodie out, you could probably look at giving Fiorini a chance. He'd probably be he'd be the next cab off the rank as far as sort of a midfielder that you come in. Or what I would like to see is I would bring in Alex Davies, because you want to give him, I would want to give him a crack now, give him a good look at it against some good midfielders. They're not like Carlton don't have an A-grade midfield by a long way, but they've got some good midfielders. So you maybe want to see how Alex Davies goes, or you could go someone like Sam Flanders or something like that. Or if Rory Atkins is fit, bring Rory Atkins in, because he's been fit for a few weeks. If he's got match fitness up through like match sim at training, bring him in as well. So you've got a few options there, but I just think Will Brodie needs to come out now. He just 8 touches for a whole game of football for a midfielder is unacceptable.
Yeah, agreed.
Sorry, we won't end on that sour note. Let's talk about who is going to win the Jack Martin Cup. I couldn't think of a better one today. No, the Dan Gorringe Cup. Let's go Dan Gorringe.
Thank you. Much better. Jeez.
Much better. Or if we want to count the Northern Bull Ants, we could go the Luke Russell Cup, but we won't include Carlton's second team. We'll go the Dan
Spooky Cup.
Yeah, the Spooky Cup. We'll go Dan Gorringe this week. So the Dan Gorringe Cup. Matt, I need a tip from you this week for Carlton and Gold Coast, and why.
So this is a tough one. The Suns really need to win this game, because the next couple of matchups are against Western Bulldogs and Sydney, and suddenly, they're 1 and 2 and playing like they should be 1 and 2. So I'm not expecting a win there. And given we lost against Adelaide, we could legitimately be 1 and 5 if we don't pick up a win here. And that just feels like that would be devastating for the Suns season. So I'm going to remain optimistic. I reckon we're a chance of spoiling the party at Metricon, so it is on the home turf. I'm going to back us in for a win. Let's put us in for a win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be close. I reckon we win by 6 points.
Oh, you like your close games.
I have no confidence in us belting a team. The only difference being North Melbourne. Even then, I shortchanged us.
Oh, I think a lot of teams will beat North Melbourne this year. So as far as I think we win as well. I think we're favourites to the bookies at the moment too, which is quite surprising. But you're exactly right. After this week, we've got the Bulldogs in Sydney, and the Bulldogs at the start of the season, I've said will win. They're going to win anyway, and I'm going to that game, so I'm a glutton for punishment. So I don't think we'll beat the Bulldogs, and Sydney's form is absolutely ominous at the moment. So unless they sort of fall off a cliff in the next couple of weeks, I would be saying Sydney are a very good chance to knock us off at home as well. But I think for Carlton, I think on our home, if this was in Melbourne, I'd probably be tipping Carlton. But at Metricon, you just hope the lads pull something out because they need to. Because if they don't, you're exactly right. They could be 1-5. And I feel like we don't you don't deserve to win games, but I don't think the Suns deserve to be 1-5. I feel like they've shown enough. They showed enough in the West Coast game, and the Adelaide game was frustrating. But I feel like if the Suns to start 1-5, I feel like that's really rough, and that's going to really set the tone for the season. So I think we desperately need a win here. I reckon we do get the win. I reckon we win by 18 points, and hope that Ben King gets on a bit of a tear as well. Nice. Yeah, that's it. Suns to win, to go 2-2, and sort of take a bit of confidence into a tough game, which will be the Bulldogs next week. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Turn Over the Tape. Thank you, Matt, as always, for joining me.
Yeah, no problem.
And we will be back next week to talk all things Gold Coast Suns. Bye-bye.